GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host and the most prominent political commentator in Lions Bay, BC. Welcome back to the show, Rafe, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you and all your listeners. Jim, it's certainly a Christmassy-looking a place out in front of Lions Bay. I've never seen snow here in 16 years, but here it is, and maybe we'll have a white Christmas. Who knows?
Well, the forecast is rain for the next 6 days, so the Vancouver Snow Removal Service will arrive eventually.
Oh, there we are.
Rafe, the Trudeau government has been in power for 1 year. What's your take on what we've seen from Ottawa so far?
Well, I'm not impressed, Jim. I really hoped for a few days after Trudeau got in that we might see some differences, particularly in the environmental area, and we haven't seen that at all. It started out beautifully with him on the international stage in Paris and becoming the boy star of the environmental movement, but that quickly faded, and he got back and started planning pipelines and LNG plants and so on and so forth, and then of course he nailed us with this LNG plant in Squamish, wood fiber, and it's been sort of one bad thing after another. And then of course with the Kinder Morgan decision, I think what troubles me about that, Jim, is, you know, that there's always the feeling in every province, and of course in British Columbia I think particularly, that they don't like us very much in Ottawa. Well, I mean, that really sort of was the icing on the cake. They really don't like us. I think for this reason I say that. They resent the fact that we want to have clean oceans, our forests, clean rivers, lakes, and so on and so forth, and they make it sound as if somehow we're bad Canadians for wanting to preserve our environment, while Alberta is a great Canadian for wanting to throw a whole bunch of crap up into the atmosphere from Site C. So all in all, I think, speaking as a British Columbian, which I do because that's what I am, I'm very disappointed. I think he's not done well here at all.
Well, yes, and as we speak, the health ministers from all the provinces are totally upset that Trudeau told them either take a cut from 6% funding from healthcare to 3% or take a hike. The ministers did not take a hike. They were there. They said, we're ready to stay here all Christmas if we have to negotiate this deal, and Ottawa won't talk to them.
Well, it's sort of been there, done that for me. It hasn't changed a hell of a lot since the days I was health minister, and it's always a fight with Ottawa, but you know, there are a lot of troubles with this, Jim. I mean, obviously you can comment on today's events and sort of say goodbye, that's it. But it's much, much deeper than that. The whole system in Canada wants a huge shakeup. People don't understand the problems. They vary from place to place. This is one of the things that every health minister from British Columbia, and I think other regions too, has had when they go back to Ottawa. Their situation is different than the next door region and the one next to that. Different for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's just as simple as weather. Sometimes it's the makeup of the population, older populations. Sometimes it's various other things, what they do in terms of industry and so on. And it's all different. The federal government, unless they've changed, have always had a one-size-fits-all, and here it is, like it or lump it. The second thing is that we have really got out of date on what illness is and what illness isn't in terms of what we cover. Now, when I was health minister, we could say, I think, we had sort of socialized medicine. It was free Medicare in Canada, with the exception of the premium, and we still charge it then, and we still charge it now. But by and large, you could look at, well, when I get old, I'm going to be all right. Well, I can tell you something, Jim, I'm old. And, I now pay over $6,000 a year for medicines from my pharmacy, which is not covered. I'd be better off if they covered that and let me pay my own doctor. So I say that because things have changed dramatically. The delivery of health care, the kind of health care that we get is much different. The costs are much different, and people are not nearly as well looked after now as they were back in the days when I was health minister and before that, because of these changes. And it seems to me it's time to have a thorough look at the overall situation in Canada. I'm always a little worried about that because, we usually pick some Supreme Court judge or something and have him wander around, and that's not that they've done a bad job, but it takes an awful long time. But I think maybe we have to spend that time. I think things have got so distorted in the healthcare system that we really have a situation that needs to be looked at immediately. Getting back to the beginning, I feel for our health minister and others. I know what it's like to go back there and have the door slammed and try to make do when you're here. People used to ask me, what's it like to be health minister? I said, all you have to do is make $1, do $1.50 work every day of your life. And that's really what it's like. And we're on the front line, and it's very, very tough. I feel for them, but I think we've got a lot to do in the health field.
Is this the kind of deal that could perhaps give the next election to the Conservatives or NDP? Well,
it's hard to say at this stage because it's a long way to go. A lot of things happen between now and then. You know that as a person that's watched elections for as long as I have. What is outrageous in year one is forgotten by year 2 or 3 or 4. But still, having said that, health doesn't get forgotten that quickly because it doesn't go away. And people feel it daily in their lives with their families, their kids, and so on. So I think it's going to be an issue. Now, whether or not the NDP or the Conservatives or the Greens have any better idea as to how to run the health service, I don't know. But I suspect if they think about it, they'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. They need a whole new look at it. What is the health care we're supposed to be giving as a decent society in Canada, and how much is it going to cost, and find out what it is that people need and look after that. Don't look after things that I don't need. As I say, I don't need a lot of help in some things, but by God, I sure need it in pharmaceuticals. And that's been, I think I say that, Jim, because it's been a dramatic change in almost everybody's life. They've all of a sudden gone from going to the doctor and having the old depressor put on their tongue and the guy grab you in the crotch, pat you on the head, and send you home with a couple of pills, to now where we are really become wired into our pharmacy. We know our pharmacist a hell of a lot better. We know our doctor. And that's very expensive. And I think these are the kind of things that if you don't look at these things, then you get out of date. If you get out of date, then the situation becomes unfair, and I think that's what's happened now.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, what's your impression of BC Premier Christy Clark?
I think she's terrible. I hate to say that because I'm sure she's a very, very nice person, but very, very nice people are not what we particularly need as a premier. I think she's totally out of touch with reality. But if I may do a little quick self-aggrandization, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter. If I can do a little self-promotion, I have an article coming out probably today in the Common Sense Canadian on Site C. And this is something that I think is so typical of Christy and the Liberal government. They make a political decision, and nothing will deter them. In Site C, you may remember there was a joint examination. Three people looked at this thing from the federal and provincial point of view. The chairman was a Dr. Swain from Victoria, and they came out with a report which seemed to say, well, we're going to have to need more power sometime. Christy and her gang jumped on that and immediately announced that Site C was a go-ahead. And Swain said, wait a minute. You didn't hear the whole story. The whole story is you wouldn't let us look at some of the things that are very, very serious. We don't really think ourselves that it's a good idea. We think it's a lousy idea. One thing you didn't let us look at was the Columbia River treaty and so on and so forth. And it's just a bad idea. It's not a good way to spend money or commit ourselves, et cetera. But you would have thought that a reasonable person would say, oh, well, yes, I guess we better have another look at this. Not a chance. It's just as if it never happened. That's the thing that it bothers me about this, Jim, is that it is entirely a political government, big P political. If it's going to sell votes, get votes, do it. If it isn't, don't pay any attention to it. And besides that, I don't think, frankly, that we've advanced ourselves over the years of the Liberal government. We've been fortunate in that we've had good times. I don't think that the Liberals can take any more credit for that than they're going to take the blame for any bad times. But by and large, I don't think we've been advanced at all, and I think the day is going to come. This is what I think is the real point. We're going to pay for all of this. We're going to pay for the bankrupting of BC Hydro, which we've done under Christy Clark and Gordon Campbell, starting with Campbell. And we're going to pay for the lack of attention we paid to the mentally ill and young people and homeless people and all those sorts of social issues that are floating about unattended. The day will come, and of course the provincial debt. And the day will come that, you have to pay the piper. The provincial debt is interesting because the Minister of Finance every year says, oh, well, look, we've got a balanced budget, so everything's fine. And Jim, if you run a household, as my wife and I do, you know that a balanced budget's easy if you toss your mortgage out and your car payments and put them over on a separate piece of paper. You can balance your budget very easily. But sooner or later, the banker's going to call you up and say, wait a minute, Jim, you better come in here and pay your loans. And this is what's going to happen to British Columbia, and it has to happen. It's not one of those things that may happen sometime or don't worry about it. It is going to happen. And if you take a look at the overall financial picture for British Columbia, particularly BC Hydro, or the gem of our Crown Corporation at one time, we are not in good shape at all. And I think she's been a very bad premier. It's been a bad government. She's very fortunate in that she has virtually no opposition. And as long as that continues, I guess it's a comparative thing. And if she looks a teeny-weeny little bit better than the opposition, then it doesn't matter that she isn't very good overall. But if you ask me about her, I think that she's been a rotten premier.
What about her program to give $37,500 to new home buyers? I didn't think it was my obligation as a taxpayer to help people to buy homes.
Well, it's even worse than that, Jim. I mean, there's always that argument, and I think it's a good argument. Nobody did that for me. Why should we do it for somebody else? Leave that aside for a second. We've been through this. We have seen this in the past. What happens is that people, young people particularly, naturally, get into houses that they can't afford, get into situations they can't afford, either or get into more expensive houses, and you wind up, in due course, with a hell of a lot of foreclosures. It's exactly the same theory as borrowing money in BC Hydro, borrowing money in the government. Sooner or later, it hits the fan. And this is going to happen from this policy. Christy, of course, is banking on the fact that that's not going to happen until after the election next May. So you don't have to worry about people going broke and getting bankrupt and getting foreclosed in 2017 and 18 and 19. She only has to worry between now and May, and it sounds good. I suspect, however, Jim, that most people are not very impressed with this. Memories are are pretty short with voters, but I'm not so sure they're short with this one. An awful lot of people remember very well that they were the ones that walked in and bought a house when, a year or two before they should have, and got themselves into a lot of trouble. Now, you can't blame people because houses are so expensive for young people now. It's really criminal, and that certainly is a problem I think has to be attacked by society as a whole. But giving this kind of a one-off sort of semi-gift, it winds up being it ends up being bad news in the long run.
Rafe, would I be correct as describing it a bigger piece of cheese in the debt trap?
Well, that's very much like, that's a pretty good description. And, it's one of those things that's very attractive when you first look at it. But, I don't know, Jim. Maybe people still are pretty dumb about these things. I don't think so. I think people are starting to look pretty carefully at these gift horses in the mouth and saying, gee, I'm not so sure that's a very good idea. We'll see in next May. But again, I have to get back to this. It's a comparative thing. And as long as Mr. Horgan is going to stay somewhere that nobody knows where he is and talk about relatively minor issues and not get into the major ones and not get into things like LNG and so on, he's making it pretty easy for her to have a free ride. And I just give you the example, my constituency, it's got the long name of West Vancouver, Cedar Sky, etc. We have a Liberal MLA who in the last 4 years has probably been as unpopular as a skunk at a christening. However, that's because of the LNG plant in Squamish, and he's in favor of it, and everybody assumed that we'd have a Green or somebody would come in and run away with the constituency. Well, the Greens are dead under this guy Weaver. The NDP haven't nominated anybody. They've got nobody, and it looks like Sturdy is going to get in just because there's going to be nobody else running against him. And this is the thing that Christy's got going for her. Somehow, there hasn't been the kind of opposition that you would expect. Now, I say this a lot. I'm loath to say it, and I'm sorry when I do. But back in my day, that certainly was not the case. The in-between times between elections, they were a hotbed of politics, no matter where you were in this province. And in my constituency in Kamloops, I mean, it was just all year long. You were in the midst of a political campaign, even in year one. And so we had hotly contested elections, and nobody could, it was tough. But she's getting this, I think, in large measure handed to her on a plate. And well, maybe that's fine if you're a Liberal, but I'm not an NDP. I just want something a little better than what we've got, and we're not going to get it under these circumstances, I don't think.
Rafe, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Always a pleasure, Jim, anytime.
Stay warm for Christmas. Bye-bye. My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Happy holidays.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.